The first sound was the tires hitting the runway, a harsh, screeching squeal that vibrated through the floor beneath my feet. I woke with a start, my head jerking forward. For a few seconds, I didn't know where I was. The cabin lights above were a muted glow, casting everyone in a tired yellow haze. A baby was crying 2 rows ahead. Somewhere to my left, a man cleared his throat. The faint smell of reheated airplane food still lingered, clinging to the recycled air. But the heaviest scent, the one that seemed lodged deep in my skin, wasn't from the plane. It was from the funeral. The bitter, smoky incense. The faint sweetness of lilies, already starting to wilt in the heat. The earthy, damp smell of freshly dug soil. I had been breathing it for days. I shifted in my seat and looked out the window. The familiar skyline of my city was barely visible through the streaks of rain on the glass. Gray clouds hung low, pressing down on the horizon like they were trying to smother it. Coming home. The words felt hollow. Because the truth was, I wasn't coming back to a home. I was coming back to 4 empty walls, a silent apartment, and an absence so big it felt like it could swallow me. I had left this country 3 weeks ago with my husband alive. I was returning without him. The seatbelt sign was still on, but people were already shifting, grabbing their bags from the overhead compartments. I stayed still, my hands resting on the phone in my lap. I didn't want a scene. I didn't expect balloons, flowers, or some grand welcome. I wasn't looking for much. Just a ride home. Someone to stand by the curb, wave when they saw me, and maybe hug me without saying a word. That was all. I unlocked my phone and opened the family group chat. The cursor blinked in the message bar like it was waiting for me to figure out the right tone. I didn't want to sound needy. I didn't want to give them an opening to tell me I should have arranged something earlier. So I kept it simple. Greater than me, flight lands at 3 p.m. Can someone pick me up? I hit send. The read receipts popped up almost instantly. First my brother, Daniel. Then my mom. I stared at the screen, willing the little typing bubbles to appear. A minute passed. Then another. Finally, Daniel's reply flashed on the screen. Greater than Daniel, we're busy, try Uber. I blinked at it. Read it again. Busy? It was a Tuesday afternoon. Busy with what? Before I could respond, my mother's reply came through. Greater than Mom, why didn't you plan better? My fingers went cold. Plan better? How exactly was I supposed to plan better for my husband to die overseas? Should I have penciled in my grief on their schedules? Booked a chauffeur the moment the doctor pronounced him gone? The words stung, but they didn't shock me. Not really. If I was being honest, this was who they had always been. Still a broken bar, there was something about seeing it, in black and white, in that tiny blue bubble on my screen, that hit different. I could have fired back a long, shaking reply. I could have told them how much those messages hurt, how utterly alone I felt in that moment. But I didn't. Instead, I typed 2 words. Greater than me, no worries. And I hit send. Those 2 words weren't casual. They weren't polite. They were a door quietly closing. because somewhere between the runway and the gate, I realized I was done. Done being the afterthought. Done being the one who always bent, always adjusted, always made room for them when they never made room for me. That was the moment something inside me shifted. And once it did, there was no going back. If you've ever had that moment when someone's coldness made you rethink everything, when you realized you couldn't keep giving them access to you, then you know the kind of story this is going to be. And before I take you further into it, don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss the rest of this journey. I didn't rush off the plane. I stayed seated, letting the aisle fill with people eager to escape the cramped cabin. I knew what was waiting for me out there. And I also knew what wasn't. No one would be at the arrivals gate, waving. No one would hold a sign with my name scribbled in marker. No one would even text, "We're here." The truth was, this wasn't a shock. It was a broken bar confirmation. Growing up in my family felt like living in a house where love was ration day and I was always last in line. My brother, Daniel, was the golden child. He could do no wrong. If he missed curfew, Mom laughed it off. If he failed a class, it was the teacher's fault. If he wanted something, he got it, whether it was a new bike, a weekend trip, or bailing out of a bad decision. Me? I was the one who followed the rules, the one they could lean on without question. The responsible one. But being responsible came with a cost. It meant my needs were always negotiable, my feelings always secondary. I remember one winter when I was 15. I broke my arm during a school soccer match. A clean break, sharp pain, the bone pressing awkwardly under the skin. The school called my mom. "I'm in the middle of something," she said. "Send Daniel." Daniel arrived 45 minutes later, smelling faintly of cigarettes, chewing gum like he was bored out of his mind. He didn't ask if I was okay. Didn't even look at my arm. Instead, he muttered, "You couldn't wait until after my plans?" The nurse gave me a pitying glance. I just stared at the floor. That was the day I learned to stop expecting rescue. When I met Ethan, he saw all of it and loved me anyway. He noticed the smallest things about me, how I tapped my fingers when I was anxious, how I always made tea a certain way, how I avoided phone calls from my family when I was too tired to handle the guilt trips. We built our own world. And for the first time, I felt safe. But my family never warmed to him. Mom would say things like, "You spend too much time with him, don't forget your family." Daniel would smirk at family dinners and say, "You've gone all quiet since you married Mr. Serious over here." They didn't see the way he held my hand when he knew I was struggling. They didn't see the way he would turn off the TV just to listen when I needed to talk. They didn't see the way he looked at me like I mattered. And then, he was gone. A sudden illness overseas. A hospital bed in a country where I barely spoke the language. Me, holding his hand and begging him to stay awake, to just a broken bar keep breathing. When it was over, I called my family. They didn't come. They didn't even call every day. Daniel sent one text, "Let me know when you're back." So when I sent that message from the plane, "A flight lands at 3 p.m. Can someone pick me up?" it wasn't just a request for a ride. It was a question. "Do I matter enough for you to show up?" And their answers told me everything I needed to know. By the time I made it through customs, my phone screen was still dark. No follow-up messages. "No, we're busy but we'll send someone." "No, are you okay?" Just silence. I stepped through the sliding glass doors into the arrivals area. The air smelled like a mix of coffee, fast food, and that strange, cold scent that only airports seem to have. All around me, people were reuniting. A little girl squealed and ran into her father's arms. A couple kissed like they'd been apart for years. Friends shouted each other's names, laughing as they collided in a hug. I stood there, clutching the handle of my suitcase, watching it all. The ache in my chest wasn't just grief for Ethan. It was something else, something deeper. It was the hollow realization that there was no one here for me. I stepped outside, and the air hit me like a slap, damp, sharp, carrying the smell of rain and exhaust. I pulled my coat tighter around me and opened the Uber app. My fingers trembled, partly from the cold, partly from a broken bar everything. A driver named Sam accepted my ride. Silver Toyota Corolla. 5 minutes away. I watched the little car icon inch toward me on the map. Those 5 minutes felt longer than the 13-hour flight. When the car pulled up, the driver stepped out, a man in his 50s with warm eyes and a kind smile. "Long trip?" he asked, his voice gentle. "Yeah," I said, my voice cracking. "Long, the broken bar and hard." He didn't ask more. He just took my suitcase, loaded it into the trunk, and opened the door for me. As we pulled away from the curb, the city blurred past in streaks of gray and silver. Rain tapped softly against the windows, the sound mingling with the quiet hum of the engine. I pressed my forehead to the cool glass, watching the streets I knew so well slip by a the corner bakery where Ethan used to get Sunday pastries, the little bookstore we'd wander through on rainy afternoons. Every landmark felt like a reminder of what I had lost. But somewhere between the airport and my apartment, my grief began to shift. Not disappear, it would never disappear, but changed shape. Because in that back seat, I started thinking about more than Ethan. I started thinking about my family. About the countless times I'd shown up for them, dropping everything to help, lending money I couldn't spare, listening to hours of their problems without ever being asked about my own. And now, when I was at my lowest, they couldn't even give me a 30-minute drive. It wasn't just neglect. It was a choice. I stared out at the wet streets and made a quiet promise to myself. I wouldn't fight for their affection anymore. I wouldn't beg for their decency. If they wanted distance, I would give it to them. And in a broken bar I would show them what life looked like without me in it. That's the thing about revenge. It doesn't always start with shouting or slamming doors. Sometimes, it begins in the silence of a back seat, with nothing but rain on the window and the sound of your own heartbeat in your ears. When the Uber stopped in front of my building, I sat there for a second before getting out. The rain had picked up, misting the windshield. I could see my own reflection faintly in the glass, pale, tired, older somehow than when I'd left. "Take care of yourself," Sam said softly as I opened the door. I gave him a small smile. "I will." It wasn't a promise I fully believed yet. but it felt good to say. Inside, the apartment was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Ethan's jacket still hung on the coat rack. His sneakers sat by the door, laces half untied like he'd just kicked them off after a long day. The mug he always used, the one with the chipped rim, was still on the counter, exactly where I'd left it. I stood there, coat still on, suitcase still in my hand, staring at the life we'd built a broken bar and at how much emptier it felt now. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom, "Did you get home?" I stared at it. Not, "Sorry we couldn't come." Not, "How are you holding up?" Just a broken bar logistics. I put the phone face down on the counter. The first pullback was small. A week later, Mom called asking if I could help her pick up some furniture she'd found online. Normally, I'd rearrange my day, drive over, and spend hours hauling heavy boxes into her house. This time, I said, "I can't." No explanation. No fake excuse. Just 2 words. There was a pause on her end. "Oh, a broken bar, okay, I guess I'll ask Daniel." Exactly. A few days after that, Daniel called. "Hey, can you spot me $500? Just for a week, I swear. I'm waiting on a payment from work." "Can't," I said simply. He didn't ask why. And I didn't tell him. It was strange at first, holding back like that. Part of me expected them to push, to demand an explanation. But they didn't. They just moved on, because they were used to me always being there, and maybe they assumed I'd cave eventually. They didn't know that something inside me had shifted permanently. Weeks turned into months. I skipped family dinners. When they texted, I sometimes took days to reply. And each time I didn't show up, I noticed a faint change in tone, a little surprise, a little uncertainty. They were starting to notice. And I liked that. Because this wasn't me being petty. This was me showing them, without a single fight or accusation, exactly what life was like without me as their safety net. It was a gray Thursday afternoon when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, a local, but not saved in my contacts. For a moment, I thought about letting it go to voicemail. Lately, my phone had become something I answered on my own terms, not out of obligation. But something in me decided to pick up. "Hello? Hi, is this a broken bar, Mrs. Parker?" the woman on the line asked, her voice warm. "Yes," I said cautiously. "This is Susan from the Willowbrook Community Center. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." I sank into a chair. "No, it's fine." "What's this about?" There was a brief pause, the kind people take when they're about to talk about something delicate. "We're organizing a memorial fundraiser. For your husband." I felt my breath catch. "Ethan?" I whispered, though I didn't need confirmation. "Yes," she said gently. "His tutoring program, a broken bar, it touched so many lives. We want to honor that. We've arranged for some of his students to speak, and we'd love for you to say a few words too." I closed my eyes. I could see him in my mind, Ethan sitting at the community center table, a dozen kids gathered around, teaching them how to break down a math problem without feeling stupid. He never saw them as charity cases. He saw them as people worth investing in. "A broken bar I'd be honored," I said finally. "That's wonderful," Susan said, relief in her voice. "Also, the local news has agreed to cover it. We'll be live around 8 p.m. that night." That detail at a live coverage lodged itself in my mind like a seed taking root. I didn't decide anything right then. But somewhere in the back of my mind, I could already feel the idea forming. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. My phone lay in front of me, screen dark. I could have texted my mother. I could have called Daniel. I could have told them about the event, invited them, given them the chance to show up. But why? They hadn't been there when I'd buried Ethan. They hadn't been there when I landed, exhausted and hollow, barely able to carry my own luggage. And I realized I didn't want them there now. This night wasn't about them. It was about Ethan. It was about the people who actually showed up when it mattered. So I told no one in my family. Not a word. The night air was crisp as I stepped out of the car in front of the Willowbrook Community Center. Lanterns lined the walkway, their warm light dancing across the pavement. Through the glass doors, I could see people gathering, friends, neighbors, former students. The room inside glowed with a soft golden light. Tables were draped in white cloth, each one decorated with photos of Ethan laughing with the kids, kneeling beside them as they worked through homework, cheering them on at school events. There was a gentle hum of conversation, the occasional burst of laughter. It felt alive. It felt full. As I moved through the crowd, people hugged me, pressed my hands, told me stories about Ethan I had never heard before. The news crew was there, setting up their cameras near the stage. One of the reporters, a young woman with bright eyes, smiled at me. "We'll be live in about 20 minutes. We'll catch some shots of you talking to people before your speech, if that's okay." "That's fine," I said. Inside, my heart was beating a little faster. Because I knew that somewhere, sitting in their living rooms, my family was watching the evening news. And soon, my face would be there. Not looking desperate. Not looking broken. But surrounded by people who cared. When it was time to speak, the room quieted. I stepped to the podium and took a deep breath. The warm light from the stage felt like it was wrapping around me. "Tonight," I began, my voice steady, "we're here to honor someone who believed in showing up, not when it was convenient, not when there was something to gain, but when it mattered." I let my eyes move slowly across the room, meeting the gazes of friends, neighbors, students. Ethan taught me that love isn't about words. It's about being there. And tonight, I want to thank every single one of you who stood by me in my darkest hours. You didn't have to be asked. You just came. I didn't mention my family. I didn't have to. Their absence was loud enough. The cameras caught it all, the smiles, the tears, the applause. And somewhere, miles away, I knew my mother's hand had frozen halfway to her coffee cup. I knew Daniel had stopped scrolling on his phone. They were watching. And realizing. By the time I stepped off the stage, my cheeks were warm from all the hugs. The applause still echoed faintly in my ears. people pressed my hands and told me how much Ethan had meant to them. A teenage boy with shy eyes handed me a folded piece of paper. "Mr. Parker helped me pass math," he said. "I'm graduating this year. I just a broken bar wanted to say thank you." I smiled through the lump in my throat. "He'd be so proud of you." Outside, the night air felt lighter than it had in months. The sky was a deep, endless navy, scattered with stars. I could still hear music drifting from inside the community center as I walked to my car. When I slid into the driver's seat, my phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Mom A7 missed calls. Daniel A5 missed calls. A few texts from my aunts. I didn't even have to open them to know what they said. I could picture the conversation that had unfolded in the family group chat. Someone had been watching the news. They'd seen me on that stage, surrounded by people who weren't them, speaking words of gratitude that didn't include them. They'd seen what they'd missed. The texts came first. "Mom, why didn't you tell us about this?" "Daniel, wow, nice of you to let your own family know." "Mom, this is embarrassing." "Embarrassing for who?" I thought. The calls kept buzzing through my drive home. When I pulled into the garage, I sat there for a minute, staring at my phone. Then I opened the family group chat. Typed 2 words. "Greater than no worries." And sent it. I put the phone face down on the passenger seat and exhaled. This time, those words didn't mean what they did at the airport. Back then, they had been a mask, a way to swallow my hurt and pretend I was fine. Now, they were final. No worries. No obligations. No more chasing people who had already chosen not to show up. It's been over a year since that night. We speak rarely, birthdays, maybe the occasional holiday text. But the constant demands, the calls for favors, the assumption that I would drop everything for them. Gone. And the space they left in my life has been filled with something far better. I have friends who check in without a reason. Neighbors who bring soup when I'm sick. People who show up because they want to, not because they feel obligated. I used to think revenge had to be loud, dramatic confrontations, cutting words, big exits. But the truth is, the sweetest revenge is quiet. It's living well without them. It's showing up for yourself. It's letting them see you thriving in places they weren't invited. And if you've ever had your own moment of clarity, that instant you realized someone didn't deserve access to you anymore, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. And while you're here, don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss more stories like this.